This is the Friendship Gardens in Tipperary Park.
You may recognize it from the TV show The Man in the High Castle, where it played as Japan. This part of the city often features in movies and TV shows, and it cosplays especially well as Japan. You've seen all the cherry blossoms. I'm out here today testing the DJI Osmo Pocket 3 mini gimbal camera. I'm less going to focus on the specs in this review and more show some sample clips and answer a couple questions that I had about the camera. In terms of video quality, this camera is excellent. DJI has over a decade of experience making cameras like this, drones and action cameras, and this device is the culmination of all of that experience. So instead of just talking about the video quality, in this review I'm going to answer some of those questions that I had, and hopefully it will help you decide whether or not this camera is worth it for you. Let's go. The first question I had was about the zoom. It does zoom smoothly, but this is a digital zoom, meaning that you're only zooming in on existing pixels. Speaking of digital zoom, one of the questions I had about this camera was regarding zoom speed. It is possible to modulate the digital zoom speed using the on-screen slider. However, the trigger which controls zoom or gimbal direction is only an on-off switch. That also means that the gimbal only moves at one speed, and it's not possible to modulate the gimbal speed unless you're using on-screen gimbal controls. Mostly that's annoying because on-screen controls are much less precise than actual physical buttons. One of the best parts about this camera is how low profile it actually is. The only thing sticking out is about 2 inches of gimbal, and while doing interviews that can help people feel more comfortable and less like there's a camera or a phone in their face. The downside to the gimbal sticking out like that is this gimbal is fragile. The camera comes with this plastic hard case that it kind of slots and clicks into, and I hate the thing because it leaves the back of the camera exposed. With the back of the camera exposed like that, dust, dirt, and other crap can still get into the camera, onto the lens, and worst of all, if something stabs into the case, it can still hit the gimbal anyways. One of the other design quirks of this camera is that it lacks a built-in tripod mount. In order to mount this camera to a tripod, you've got to attach this external piece, which makes the camera ridiculously tall. This is a monkey puzzle tree. I didn't realize they were actually native to South America because they grow everywhere around here. It turns out that these trees were a fad for Victorian-era settlers wanting something exotic in their gardens. One thing that surprises me about this camera is that it does not use electronic image stabilization to complement the gimbal stabilization. DJI's Osmo Action Camera series has excellent EIS, which would adjust for some micro stuttering that may show up on gimbal video. As I've been walking and talking to the camera, the gimbal footage is super duper smooth, but let's see what running looks like. I'm holding the camera as smooth as I possibly can. This is kind of awkward and I must look like an idiot, but well, we'll see how the stabilization is. Let's see how that compares to the electronic image stabilization of a couple other cameras. This is the OnePlus 8 Pro in super steady mode, walking, running. This is the Pixel 7a in its highest stabilization mode, walking, running. Finally, this is the DJI Osmo Action 1 in its only stabilization mode, walking, running, look, here's another one. One of the other downsides of this camera's lower resolution image sensor compared to the Osmo Pocket 2 is lower quality photos. In terms of detail, the photos are definitely a little bit crunchier because they're only 8 megapixels. However, you're really probably not going to use this camera for photos anyways. Use your phone. The other thing I'm super curious about is audio quality. My DSLR does have an audio level input, but it kind of sounds terrible. My DSLR does have an input and I do have a wireless transmitter, but quite frankly, the audio from that sounds awful too. This room sucks. It's got a lot of reflection off the walls. I've put blankets on the walls and that doesn't really help. So here it is. Here's what the audio sounds like from the DJI with its built-in transmitter. This thing is meant for the camera, and this is probably the best wireless audio that you're gonna get with it. This is my second time doing the studio test. The first time I did it, the camera was really struggling with autofocus, jumping in and out of focus. I guess I didn't have enough contrast between my face and the background, so I've changed out the background color, I put on a contrasting shirt, and I'm gonna try a couple different settings to see if I can get some better results. The first mode I wanted to test out was the active face tracking mode, and this is the mode that really struggled last time when I was doing the studio shooting, especially when I held out a product up here. Couldn't really figure out whether it was trying to focus on this or my face, and yeah, the results were awful. So hopefully with a little bit more contrast, it does better. I'm particularly interested in this mode because it's almost like somebody's here in the studio filming me. I go up, down, left, right, and the camera follows me, making for a much more dynamic shot than just a static shot of my face with me describing the product. It's kind of boring. The next thing I wanted to try out was locking the focus. Now I've used the DJI Mimo app on my phone to lock the focus on my face, so hopefully it's just not going to refocus at all. Means if I do move forward a little bit, things are going to be out of focus. It's not tracking my face, which is a bit of a shame. I really hope that using more contrast works out because on the app, I cannot find a way to lock the autofocus and still have it track my face back and forth like this. Guess we'll see. It's kind of incredible. I hope that it shows up on screen as well as it does here. Kind of like this just sort of shimmering redness, greenness. Whoa. This is going to be an abrupt conclusion because it's raining and I don't want to get myself wet and I don't want to get this camera wet. It was super expensive and it's not very waterproof. Video quality on this camera is excellent with very good gimbal stabilization overall. I do wish that there was electronic image stabilization to complement the gimbal because time to time I did notice some micro stuttering, especially when I had the camera mounted on the tripod. I went to move the tripod and when it hit the ground again I just noticed a little bit of vibration. I do also wish that this camera had a physical optical zoom instead of just the digital zoom. The digital zoom quality is not that good overall, and I guess it's useful if you're filming in 4K and downsampling to 1080p, but yeah, a physical zoom would be really nice, especially at this price point, and especially when some DJI drones do have that physical zoom. It's not like DJI doesn't have the technology to do it, right? Finally, my one big complaint about this camera is just how hot it gets. If you're filming like I'm doing right now with the camera held out in front of you, it's a warm summer day, this thing gets toasty and super sweaty. It's kind of gross actually. I do also wish some of the more advanced features were available outside of the app, but I knew that coming into this camera that DJI is really highly tethered into its app. Without the app in your pocket, there are some things that you can't change and that's just kind of the way it is. Overall, I do really like this camera. If you got the budget for it and you're its target audience, I think you'll like it too. Bye!